On accueille Ophélie Bazin, qui est responsable du pôle
We're
innovation
going to listen
végétale.
to Ophélie Bazin, who's in charge of the vegetable innovation for Yves Rocher and in charge of all experimentation programs, because agronomic experimentation takes place not only in institutes and research centers, but also in private companies. So we wanted to give the floor to one of these private companies so that they tell us what they're doing with Yves Rocher in terms of experimentation and innovative practices. I'll give you the floor.
Notre invitation et donc 20 minutes d'intervention.
You've got 20 minutes, please. Well, thank you. Thank you to the TEPMI. Today, I would like to talk to you about agroecology for the maps and what we do in Yves Rocher. And for that, I wanted to talk to you, going slowly, talking about what we understand by agroecology, what do we understand by our map system, and then detail the trials and practices that we have, giving you a little more information. So let's start at the beginning. So to begin, in Yves Rocher, we grow plants in agroecology and in organic modes. In agroecology, as opposed to organic farming, there are no specifications. So in agroecology, you can define your own understanding. For us, it's extremely important to understand and to make sure people understand what we mean by agroecology. Now, you can see it on the screen here as defined by the high-level panel of experts in the United Nations. They defined that there were 13 principles, which I'm not going to talk about because it would take too long. It would be an entire conference in and of itself. But the idea is to say that this is a definition which is holistic and which has been committed to us by the UN. It talks about biodiversity, about cooperation, food systems, agroecosystems, etc., and knowledge sharing. So the idea here is to talk about what we do, what we understand by agroecology. So what we've simplified it very quickly then. Agroecology is the idea of putting our agrosystem in harmony with the surrounding ecosystems. So what are these surrounding ecosystems? We've got three, as you can see in front of you. We try to always be in harmony with them. The first one is environment, biodiversity, agronomy. Now, by that, we mean the reduction of soil use, not using synthetic fertilizers or pesticides, have agroecological infrastructures in place. I think that's actually quite normal when you think about agroecology. The second wing is commercial and social. We can't do this if we don't guarantee the well-being of everybody who works with us or our target audience. So when our target public, we have to be always looking at the well-being. I'll give you a concrete example. No children working in the field, obviously, and that can run up to, helping welcome disabled workers. And then we also try and work within a territory and a network. And by that, we mean we think it's a mistake to say that we can have one single solution and just copy and paste that solution everywhere. For us, we must adapt to the territory in which we're working. We must adapt the solution to a given place, and to do so, you must know your place. You must be part of it. You must be a positive influence in it. You must be a dynamic force in this territory. So a great deal of energy is spent on the development of our relationship with the people in the area where we work. We're a big company in Brittany. And lastly, your network, well, that's what we're doing here, isn't it? We believe in what we're doing. We believe in collective intelligence. We try to create, we share our knowledge. We try to talk to other people who can bring knowledge to us. That represents for us then agroecology. That's our definition. And to follow this, we rely on two pillars. Science, obviously. The idea is to say we will never really understand all the interactions that take place. what's happening in one single teaspoon of earth. However, we try to use some levers to make sure we do it properly and choose the correct levers. Make sure that levers have a positive impact. We're going to use scientific methods. We're going to do scientific experiments in agronomy. And the second pillar is continuous improvement. Always asking, can we not do better? We always have to be doing better. We must never just rest on our laurels. We can change this, we can change that. Perhaps we could do better. Perhaps we could add something new. Always question what we're doing, and that helps really encompass our vision of agroecology. Now, we have a department. I think it's clear that this is a very ambitious definition. I'm sure you'd agree. We have a certain number of means at our disposal. So very quickly then, this is our service. We've got 5 different hubs within the service. We've got production. We've got 60 organic hectares. By that I mean ones in which we're practicing organic farming. And you can see I've put plants there. I've put them on the left. 2 are grown in an ice tunnel in a cold stream. That's production. Then we have a botanical garden here to try and speed up experimentation in agroecology, and we have biodiversity and a teaching wing. And as I said, the idea behind all of this is to not work in a silo. We don't want to do agroecology alone. We want to reach the maximum number of people to try and work together. And this allows us to be a laboratory, where we can really put into practice all that we're talking about. We have a lab for ourselves. We're able to test, and we're able to share that knowledge with others in the wake of our tests. Now I'm going to go into more practical aspects. Now that was the theory. There's a very singular and specific kind of sector. So the first experiment we did was, as you can see in front of you, we began to say, okay, we're in agroecology. What happens every time we make a decision? We try and think like agroecologists. But how do we know we're really working in the right field? How can we assess ourselves and what we're doing? Happily for us, the FAO, the Food Organization, helped us with, they have a program called TAPE, and we used this in order to assess ourselves, to see what our strengths are and where our weaknesses lie. And we realized that in our weaknesses, one of the weaknesses we had was synergy. So in maps, we've only got cosmetic plants, and many of them come from the same family, the Asteraceae. We didn't have any animals around us. So that was a warning. So the idea was then, okay, how can we change? How can we include more animals into the system without becoming breeders? Obviously, that's not what we want to do. We're Yves Rocher. We produce cosmetics. We do not produce milk. So the idea was, okay, could we not introduce some sheep into a crop-producing area, because they could keep the plants tidy, keep the fields tidy, and they could help lower the costs of maintaining the fields and managing weeds. The introduction of animals could do just that. And let's see if that has any kind of beneficial impact on biodiversity. So when we tried to put this in place, there were 2 variables. We've introduced ryegrass to it and sheep. So we put all of this parcel in ryegrass, and the other one is in what we call crop X, with different modes of production here in order to distinguish the effect of the sheep on the plant and the effect of the ryegrass on the plant. We had a control group to see, one group that was working just with weeds, one with ryegrass and no sheep, one with ryegrass and sheep, but later on in the season. And as you can see later in the season, I hope you're following, says the lady. So the idea is then to measure the effect on the crop, the morphology, the yield, etc., because that's the point, that's essential to what we do. But not only that, what we wanted to see, what was the effect on weed control? Did we have to do less? Did we have to do more? What can we do with regards to our carbon footprint? Look at the effect on soil and look at the effect on our biodiversity. Are sheep going to have an impact on the soil? Are they going to have an impact on the biodiversity? That's what we mean. Every time we change something, we have to try and have a comprehensive and holistic vision on how the whole system might be changed. Now, here's some results very quickly. Right, the sheep don't have damage the resid on this particular crop at all. With ryegrass, they seem to be able to manage weed control very well, so we're very happy with that. However, the ryegrass that's installed in the crop seems to be somewhat competitive with this and help diminish the yield, reduce the yield. And I think that's probably linked to water, excuse me. And this confirmed that having an experimental design which allows us to divide the effect from the sheep from the effect of the ryegrass cover was really important in our test. And the impact on the soil, well, at the moment it's kind of it's neutral. We don't know. It's neither negative nor positive. We'll have to wait a few more years. So the conclusion for us is that the experimentation has to continue. We have to go further, maybe look at a different crop cover, or leave the sheep just with the weeds. We have to keep going. That's the bottom line. Now, the next experiment was a thesis that we have in the department. We're doing this working with Rennes 1, the university. I will spare you the entire name of what we're doing, but I will tell you what we're doing. This is just started, the thesis. We've really just started. We're right at the beginning. And the idea is to look and see how we can have what we call company plants, cover plants, from syndrome to syndrome, how they can have an effect on the plants that we use in the cosmetic industry through their interaction with the gut of the soil, the microbiota in the soil. And there are 3 levels. We're going to look at the morphology of the plants. Does it improve the morphology of the plant? And the second is on the secondary metabolic composition, where in cosmetics we have to have certain molecules so that they can be effective in our products. So is this modified or changed in any way by this interaction? And the third aspect is looking at pollinization. What can pollinize? Who's pollinating? Who's having a pollinizing impact on the plant? So, of course, we have very flowery, very pretty-looking plants. We have 3 wings and 3 areas of interest. The first one, we're going to start by saying this is what we did anyway in our plants, which are good or bad collaborators with a certain number of microorganisms with which we're familiar and we know how they react. If we took the model of one of our plants that we find wonderful, but in general doesn't really interact with the soil, then we're going to have very little of effect. And so it's going to be a bit of a shame for our results. So that's what we're doing. It's ongoing in the lab. We're trying to choose a model plant to continue the experiment. And that will be what? That will be moving on to wing number 2 in the lab, trying to implement the story of succession between company plants and our target plants. And that means either we're going to put a plant and then take it out and then seed our plant our cosmetic plant to see if there is an effect in a winter cover, from the winter cover, and then put the company plant and the target plant in the same environment, to see if they can talk to each other through their microorganisms, if there could be any interaction, and look at the effects that there might have in the various categories that I have already outlined. And the third area is, as Benjamin said, to go and see if that works in the field, if the results that we have in the lab are translated into the results that we have in the field. And all the time, we are trying, what are we trying to do? We're trying to feed the knowledge pool, which is fundamental to what we do, in agronomics anyway. And secondly, to see if we could improve the way in which we do things. This is all about continuous improvement. Are there cover plants who might have beneficial effects, or do we have to leave sometimes some weeds? Do we have to leave weeds in the fields with our maps? Perhaps this could be beneficial. Could we find a way, perhaps, of living more closely in cohabitation rather than just constantly fighting against the weeds? I'm not teaching you anything. I know this. I know you know that weeds are particularly annoying. So this thesis, I think, will reach its end in 3 years. We're in the first 6 months, and I hope to be able to come back to talk to you about the results once it's reached its completion. The next experiment is one that we're doing in tunnel conditions, in a cold tunnel. 2 particular plants and the 9 plants that we cultivate, which when we work on them, they are in a cold tunnel. One is the Calculus edulus, and the idea there is it's a twofold idea. Unlike the first experiment where we took an experimental parcel or plot and we put an experiment in it. Here we're actually in production conditions, and my colleagues in production can tell me saying we have a problem. We have lots of carpal bourgeois in the tunnel. It's very difficult to weed. Could we test something to improve the weeding? I said, yes, of course, we'll test something, why not? And parallelly, we were aware of everything that was happening, obviously linked to climate change, drought, and the very precious nature of water. So we're going to try and change this parameter. So what did we do? We did this Carpus brutus edulis, and we put a tunnel in place, and in this tunnel, we changed the way we irrigated. We went from, it was micro-spraying. We tested droplets with mulch of geohemp, which was compressed to create a tarpaulin. And in the second tunnel, we put the drip feed in with, on one side, nothing for the control group, the negative control group of the mulch, and on the other side, lupin mulch. And in the third tunnel, we kept spraying, and we didn't put anything in terms of cover plants. So that was really the control for the experiment. And spraying and lupin mulch as well. So as you see, the 2 experimental variables are mulch and the irrigation systems, either by droplets or by microaspersion. We have to look at the effect on the crop. The Carpal brutus edulis, I don't know if you really know this plant, but it's a plant which is quite fatty. It's very invasive. So the idea of putting it in mulch wasn't necessarily easy to come up with. We want to know if it's going to economize, if it's going to save on the space that normally it uses, etc. Is it going to take hold? But we also had to look at the different aggressors to see in the mulch, because we had lupin mulch. Is this going to have an impact on the pest colonies? The biological indicators of the soil were also to be taken into consideration. In a tunnel, for us, it's more complicated to have a positive effect on the opinion we have of the soil and biodiversity than if it's above soil or without a tunnel where it's less anthropized. Temperature and the humidity of the soil is important, and evidently we had to have an economic analysis to see if this was financially viable. For some results then, first of all, obviously there's certain random events that happen over the course of the season. When you have a drought and you have to stop watering, there's going to be an effect on your experiment. However, before that, with regards to the results, we saw clearly that with lupin and geohemp, these were both very effective for weeds. The production departments, they were actually quite happy with the result. But however, the development of culture, well, with geohemp, it seemed more complicated. There was a negative effect of this geohemp. We saw the plant didn't really take root. So we had to rethink that solution. In terms of irrigation, droplets irrigation certainly allowed us to save some water. We were very happy to have this result. And finally, in terms of humidity, well, geo-hemp and lupin mulch allowed us to really maintain the level of humidity in the soil. So it helped us make savings. And the last parameter which we have to change is going to be done at harvest time, and that's going to be the end of November. There we'll have to see, we'll have to look at the various natures of our plants, the characteristics, whatever parameters have been put in place, or whichever ones we have been changed, because this is a cosmetic plant. For now, the conclusion is that the new production methods with droplets and droplet irrigation and with lupin seems to work. And we'll have to look if we can perhaps generalize that to the ficoids, to these ice plants, which would be our second principal culture. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that these few examples were able to give you some ideas. I'd be very happy to discuss this at length if you wish. These are a few examples amongst the many that we've implemented. Some have been put in place in order to change our technical approach to move more towards agroeconomy. But it's an ongoing process, a continuous process. We're trying to make headway. Every year, we're trying to move forward in order to have a more holistic vision of production of maps.